Well, hi everybody, welcome to Afterburner. I'm Bill Whittle. I'd like to start by taking a couple of snapshots today, just at random. Are you sitting down? Well, yeah, of course you are. Nobody stands that surfs the internet. Anyway, you might want to wrap a little duct tape around your head. It's going to be a bumpy ride on the Outrage Express today. So to get started, in Pennsylvania, former Penn State defensive coordinator Jerry Sandusky has, as of this taping, 40 charges of sexual misconduct pending, including one boy who was raped by him 100 times, including several encounters in the Penn State locker room. Horrific though that is, that's not the most disturbing part, at least to me. When legendary head coach Joe Paterno was fired over the incident, Penn State students rioted in the streets, not because of the horror and the disgrace of it all, but rather because they had lost their football coach. You know, the first young man to come forward with the allegations against Sandusky was so teased, tormented, and bullied over the loss of Joe Pa that he had to drop out of high school. Moving on. Commercial fisherman Carlos Rafael was out trawling recently. That is a dirty, dangerous, and difficult job. Now, upon retrieving his bottom nets, he discovered the world record-setting tuna, all 881 pounds of it. Tuna don't feed off the bottom. It must have gotten snared as the nets were sinking. An event that Rafael called once in a blue moon. Now, being an honest and upstanding man, Rafael was prepared for such a once in a blue moon stroke of fortune, and fortune it was, for that fish was worth about $500,000 in sushi-crazed Japan, and had purchased not one but 15 tuna permits over the last 4 years, and those are not cheap either. Now, the instant that the fish was aboard, he radioed to shore and announced the freak event to the tuna fishing hotline. In other words, he did everything he thought was right. He did it all by the book. But the book says that tuna can only be caught on a rod and reel. And so in order to prevent law-abiding commercial fishermen from having any more once-in-a-blue-moon happy accidents, they, the government, confiscated the fish. National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration policy is, rather conveniently I think, not to share the sales proceeds with fishermen found to be in violation. Monica Allen, Deputy Director with NOAA Fisheries and Public Affairs, helpfully explained that, quote, if it's determined that there's been a violation, the money will go into the Asset Forfeiture Fund, unquote. So, the honest fisherman trying to feed his family and those of his hardworking employees get nothing, and the feds get $500,000 for a new boat or a van or for some bonuses or something. That's just swell, isn't it? You know, a commentator at the Yahoo link said Mr. Rafael should be allowed to keep the fish and throw the government back in the water. And finally, since there's only so much more that the human soul can take, let's just end with this. Former Philadelphia school superintendent Arlene Ackerman retired from her post where she led one of the worst public school districts in the industrialized first world. Now, the good people of Pennsylvania rewarded her with a salary commensurate with the size of her failure, including a tidy little taxpayer-funded bonus in the amount of $905,000. Entire families have and will work their entire lives to pay for Madam Ackerman's retirement, and you and I will too eventually, because as soon as this woman received her $1 million buyout, hey, who quibbles over 100 grand between friends, right? She applied for unemployment. Given the impressive size of her previous taxpayer-funded salary, that means that Madam Ackerman will be able to collect the maximum allowable Pennsylvania unemployment amount of $573 a week. So let's see, $573 a week. Let's see, her $905,000 payout would be good for 1,579 weeks. In other words, 30 years. But she'll get her unemployment check too. You just watch. So, what do these stories all have in common? Well, two things. First of all, they're common. And second, they're an outrage. They're an outrage. And as we see stories like this coming in faster and ever faster and more outrageous, we start to suffer from an outrage overload and put our heads down and decide we'll just have to take it until the end, which we pray will come sooner rather than later. It didn't used to be this way in America. And it's not just the government. The student reaction to the Penn State horror is proof that this is much, much deeper than that. Look, I don't know about you, but I feel like a guy with a flashlight looking for some dry rot under the foundation of my childhood home, only to discover termite colonies the size of automobiles, pits of rattlesnakes, flood damage, corrosion, heavy metal leakage, toxic mold, and mass human graves. Things are not just bad, they're awful, they're terrifying. And that's why, my friends, that outrage you feel is actually your ally. The people who perpetrate this appalling degeneracy want you to think that being outraged somehow makes you hateful. On the contrary, hatred is a soul-destroying cancer that eats at you from within, but outrage is the natural, decent, and appropriate reaction to the presence and tolerance of lies, deceit, incompetence, immorality, and the imposition of these things upon the rest of us in society. You know, my good friend Mark Twain once wrote that a man he knew would spend $10,000, 1880s dollars, to recover a single penny taken from him unfairly. Now, that such a person would do such a thing over so small an outrage sounds crazy to the modern ear, but he is the sane one. And it's the society which is crazy, because no one dared cheat a man with that kind of reputation. It's a reputation we as a people need to regain one small step at a time. So if you want to stop these outrages, go get 5 people who feel the same way and who would not have voted otherwise into the voting booth on the first Tuesday in November in even-numbered years. It's really just that simple.